I hear a lot of people saying the blues, but I'm gonna tell you what the blues is. When you ain't got no money, you got the blues. When you ain't got no money to pay your house, you still got the blues. Cause you think it easy.
Welcome to this installment of Blind Eggs and Ham. This is a podcast discussing the visually impaired world from my perspective. I'm your host, Jason. In today's podcast installment, I'd like to share my recovery story. Today's installment was recorded on March 26, 2019. In discussing my recovery, the orthopedic aspect of it was pretty mundane. Everything kind of coasted along as expected. I got up, I started walking as fast as I could. Went from moving around in distances in a wheelchair to walking with a walker to walking with a support cane. And then the visual impairment issues started late November 2016, and that was probably the most difficult portion of my recovery. Having the mobility issues was difficult enough post-op for the first several months, first 8 months, 10 months, pain-wise and so forth, while the prosthetic implants in my spine recovered and the bone bridge, or osseous bridge as they call it, built across it, and that took a year and a half. It was difficult with my wife working, trying to get out. My wife was juggling being a mom. My wife was juggling being a wife, being a caretaker to myself and her mom, as well as making sure that the household ran. When I couldn't drive, before I had the vision issues, I needed help getting to and from appointments. My wife would take time off of her work to bring me to whatever, sometimes 3-4 appointments in a week, sometimes 2 or 3 days in a week. Some of them were in Dartmouth, most of them were in Dartmouth. Occasionally we'd have follow-ups in Concord. The most difficult aspect was the esophageal dilations or dilatations, where they would put me under, and those at this recording were 36 of them, and each of those resulted in basically a 3-day recovery post-op of feeling groggy like crap and moving and having the pain inside my chest from my esophagus. Basically, they put a silicone rod down my esophagus to open it up in small minutes of mirrors because it was too fragile. They were trying to slowly expand it. And for the first 8 or so months, that was a difficult part, and the vision issues hit, and I found myself stuck inside 2, 3, 5 days at a time on a regular basis. I was starting to mind, and we got through the first winter a little bumped and bruised. And as the spring came around and it was decided that I needed to learn how to get around, my therapist had reached out to Future Insight, and I reached out to now caseworker Jennifer, and we got connected with orientation and mobility. And I would have to say hands down that my orientation and mobility instructor was probably my lifesaver in the beginning. It was difficult learning how to walk again, having parts of my spine being fixated from T8 to L2. Basically, my chest does more. I can a little bit of outline at the time, no bending or twisting or anything for almost a year. And then the orientation and mobility came. We got through the physical therapy part. The orientation and mobility was a profound portion. That taught me literally how to walk, how to get up again with a stick and get out there and find my world again. My wife wouldn't let up. She didn't let me feel sorry for myself, aside from the time that I spend inside the house because she had to work and be quiet. I found myself spending a lot of time laying down with my face staring at the ceiling and not having depth perception, just seeing nothing but white all the time. I had music going almost all the time, churning in the background. But the orientation and mobility aspect actually got me out of the house. It got me into Walmart again, where I learned the store by memory mapping. The first few trips were kind of interesting with Dave, my instructor. Scared shitless out of my mind trying to use the cane that I have, which was completely inappropriate for the method that he wanted to me and how I was trying to use it. He put my first cane in my hand March of 2007, and that cane quickly became friend, my scepter, my magic. That became everything, and I learned the power that cane wield, adjusting around, but also how people around me change. Once we got out of Walmart, and I started walking around, getting around to different places with my strength, I kind of lost my back throughout the winter. And then I started kind of walking on my own a little bit with the kids, and then kind of ran into some roadblocks trying to get around on my, because where we lived in the country, there was no safe passage out of our neighborhood. We got to the top and it basically is a T. You go to the left and there's a hairpin curve which you can't see around the two S's that form it. And to the right, it's a long straightaway, but it's also obscured by a hill with limited sight distance, and at times you don't see people. You're right on top of them no matter where you are on the road. So it's difficult enough as a sighted person about visual impairment. It's very dangerous. And I found myself, even though learning the neighborhood, just getting out and walking to the top of the hill and back by that August, I was still running into roadblocks because I couldn't really go too far. And I wanted to walk downtown or at least build up my strength, and it happened. Then the second winter came. And that September, that fall, I had started with the peer support group. It was the next part I recovered. And the peer support group is a confidential group. There's 12 to 15 of us, and we're all visually impaired to various degrees. And I quickly learned that, one, I wasn't alone, and two, my visual impairments were just as unique as I was, as anyone else was who was in that room. There's no one right way per se. And as I continued my orientation and mobility, we stopped in the summer so that I could build up, and then resumed in the spring again. And things kind of took off. And through the support group, I learned that there was a recreational weekend put on by the New Hampshire Lions Club. I like to describe a lot of my recovery in terms of guideposts or milestones, and this was definitely one of the points. And Vision Weekend, as it was called, was kind of my first big boy moment, getting out and around. And I'm thinking today that that's just over a month from now. The Vision Weekend is coming up again. And as I mentioned in my first episode, my wife and I had traveled to Florida, and I really didn't find a need to travel on my own, so I spent a lot of time in sighted guide with my cane out for identification. And I think a lot of that we did out of comfort because it was just easier. My wife was tired, mentally exhausted. We were hoping the vacation was a time to relax, but we also found that traveling with a person with limited vision is difficult. Hands down, it's a bitch. And if you don't know what you're doing, you're constantly nipping and tucking the environment and you're on mental alert for everything until they're seated. And it just became easier for me to grab an arm and for her to just lead the way so she didn't have to move things out of the environment. And I never really exercised the power that was in my cane until Vision Weekend. And I don't remember exactly the scenario because it was so busy. There was so much going on. There were so many things happening at once. We got off the bus, ended up in an atrium. There's a lot of chaos with, hello, welcome to Vision Weekend. We got our goodie bags. We were told what was going on. And during that time, they were doing a check-in and preparing our room keys. And getting from place to place, I was given a sighted guide. And while I was waiting, somebody had asked if I knew how to shore. Yeah, but I don't do a lot of it inside. I don't have a lot of experience. And she kind of took me by the shoulder and took me by the hand with my cane and taught me how to shore the carpet and whatever the tile floor was. And we walked to the service desk. And from there, she pointed out that from here to there is the elevator in this direction, and you take a left to that direction through the rotunda and you're outside. And from the service desk to the left, you go through a restaurant of sorts to the atrium where you can sit and relax. There was a store and so forth. And once she put it into perspective in terms that I could understand, I took off like a frickin' jackrabbit. I was getting around on my own, and holy shit, I was buzzing around any opportunity I had. If my roommate Jeff needed anything, I took the opportunity to go and grab it just to say I did some stuff. And by the end of the weekend, a few friends that I had met needed some assistance getting around, and they had limited mobility. And I was able to get them to the places that they wanted just from the skills that I had learned that Friday evening. And from there, my career, if you will, as a traveler has just taken off. And over the last couple of years, my vision has graded even more so, and I find that even more photophobic than I was at the early onset, and I rely more cane outside of from surrounding. And after Vision Weekend, I met my soon-to-be best friend Tom, and he invited me down to his place in Concord, and we started that May coming down. And the first couple of trips were very anxious for to be out on my own in the public with my cane in the public eye, trying to make sure that I didn't mess up. I was more scared about running into something or dancing with a pole or what have you. But I really wasn't paying attention, and we were attached elbow to elbow. And Tom has a guide dog, and his right arm was free, so I was navigating left arm because he was my right hand for cane work. And he taught me how to create a mental map of working downtown Concord. Now, kid, I had known Concord really doesn't change much, but I never really paid attention too much to how this laid out way the one-ways go in the downtown area, how the flow from in and out, how the crossing patterns were, and so forth. And in coordination with working with Tom, I was also working with Dave, and eventually I was meeting in Concord, and we just lit up the map. Working downtown, Dave taught me how to cross the various intersections, how to use my hearing to distinguish when vehicles were coming, to know when to cross, how to parallel cross, how to get from place to place, learning landmarks to various locations. And by the end of that summer, Tom and myself and my O&M instructor Dave had lit up most of downtown Concord, from basically the lights at the Capitol buildings down to the south end of Concord, which in total is almost 3 miles round trip to and from. And I had really built up my stamina. Now, during that time with the O&M training and working with Tom and so forth, I added another component to my recovery, and that was taking advantage of the local YMCA. June of 2018, working with Thomas over the summer and with Dave, I was asked to submit for a scholarship at the local YMCA to see what they could offer membership, and they were able to knock some off of the membership price, make it affordable for me. And I started going once a week while we were down there. We'd go for 20-30 minutes, and I was slowly with one of the trainers to build up my strength. Went from a few pounds just to do the motions to be muscle strength, to doing a few more pounds and a few more pounds. And I finally plateaued to a point where my rods and hooks don't allow me to do anymore. It creates a painful situation. But now I'm going 2 or 3 times a week to the YMCA, and that became another profound recovery. Being able to take my physical therapy to a different level. I started working with a trainer to improve my cardio, started walking downtown, and when I started working with Tom, I would do my cooking skills, and in exchange for coming down, I felt it my place to offer a meal of some sort, and I would bring the fixings down and we would do different things. And I got brave enough to where I started walking to the local market basket, which is about 3/4 of a mile round trip, plus whatever you walk in the store. And I started doing solo runs and getting help from the store to do my shopping, and things just took off. But it put me into a situation while I was building up all of this independence, that 1 day or 2 days a week that I was coming down to Concord left me in a prison cage in Tilton where the door was wide open. Yes, I could go out and walk, but I was limited to my neighborhood. There was really nothing of interest downtown if I could get there, and that was a 1.5 mile walk just to get to the outskirts of downtown. And that would waste all of my energy just getting to and from. And Tom had introduced an independence that I didn't think that I would regain again. And there I was at home in Tilton, laying down 2 or 3 days in a row, waiting for the family to come home, preparing meals and so forth, but not really getting out, and just chomping at the bit with so much energy that I was building up, it became difficult. And after the surgeries, I became become acquainted with anxiety and depression as well, and they called it transitional anxiety, going from an able-bodied person to a person who is disabled with the orthopedic issues and now with the visual issues. And that felt like the rug had been pulled to counseling as well. But the anxiety just kept piling on, and we couldn't figure out if it was for medication or whatnot. And as it turned out, there was a lot of stress in the household, I realized. And the multiple days in the house and only seeing the family little bits, having sleep issues for hours at a time and not contacting a couple times a week. I was really looking forward to getting down to Concord, and it really kind of sucked on the weekend when my wife, who just worked 40 hours a week, plus whatever appointments came up, really wanted some downtime. In her downtime, I wanted grocery shopping and so forth. And it had created a volatile, and the family dynamics had changed quite a bit. And it got to the point that my wife and I couldn't exist in the same household because we were at each other's throat. Everybody was unhappy. The kids were. The only time I found myself happy and at peace was when I was in Concord and talking with my best friend about being on and releasing some of the anxiety. And by September, it became apparent that I needed to relocate. Things were no longer great at home. I was arguing with the kids, I was arguing with the wife, the health, and by whatever miracle the universe decided to provide to me, I suddenly had an opportunity that September to an apartment in downtown Concord at an affordable rate. My wife and I had looked at the finances for us to make sure that without damaging the household, without damages and so forth, and I moved out. And it was a really tough adjustment through October, November, not seeing the kids on a regular basis, not having my family. But on the other side, I was still able to get out, to do a lot of positive activity, the YMCA, work out a couple times, really building up my stamina. But the looming issue was the winter. One of the problems I found after my surgeries was the inability to tolerate cold. And there are days when the wind is blowing, the house will be near 8 degrees, and I'm wrapped up in blankets and a sweatshirt and sweatpants and so forth, and I'm still cold just because of whatever is going on outside. He doesn't like it, and sometimes 3 showers to stay warm. And moving to Concord, I wasn't sure how I was going to handle the winter, but looking back, here it is towards the end of March, I've survived it. The last anxiety attack that I had was back in December, which took me down over Christmas, and we got through that. That was rather damaging the wife, and we've since talked about. But moving to location here in Concord became a tranquil, peaceful place. I found for a while I couldn't be my other home because it was too wound and volatile. I found that after a couple of months here, I had finally started, and I could go at night, and my brain wasn't racing about whatever walks when I wanted to, I could work out. And my wife and I started the process of marital reunion, and she had started counseling, and I had started counseling again towards the first of the year. And that really started my mental health recovery on top of my physical recovery, being in a different place where now, when we're together, we appreciate each other's company. Since the end of the holidays, my daughter has moved in with me, and we've created a small family dynamic here. Our household is split with my son, Matilda, my wife, and my daughter. And we're working on making our children whole, as well as ourselves, as well as our family, as well as our marriage. And we're finding that we've set a day where it's just us after my wife's been in counseling. And we'll do various activities, whether it's watch TV, sitting up. It felt very destructive at the time moving out, but looking back to where we are now, it clearly was the right move. And in looking back, that catalyst for my friend Tom, who saw so many things that are common in the community. My wife had articulated that she was having a problem being a wife, being a caretaker, being a mom, as well as trying to be an individual. And she told me with tears in her eyes that she had lost herself in giving up being a mom, which she did enjoy, but getting sick and giving up those years to take care of her husband, which if the situation was flip-flopped out in a heartbeat as well. But there were a lot of long nights that drew on her, a lot of long days on her, a lot of things that were hurled her way that were out of her, a lot of days crying. And there were a lot of ripples that were created from my vision issues, the orthopedic and injection issue that needed a lot of healing. And in separating and coming to Concord, created that space, and having my daughter come down, and having my wife wasn't care of everyone. And now I can take care of my daughter and get her to her appointments. We got her into therapy, her anxiety, my getting sick, and the vision issues and so forth. And now going 6 months into the separation, we're finding everybody in the family has finally found a peace and harmony in the respective living situation. And we're still a family, even though we're separated by miles. We still get together most weekends to some degree to spend time together, to spend the night, reconciliation, talking, feeling, searching, and so and trying to our marriage again piece by piece. And right now, the happiness that we both have in our respective living situations is hard to give up. But it was also difficult starting over, seeding a new apartment, used furniture and so forth, finding tables, finding cooking and so forth, which ended up finding wholesale. We liquidated some of our savings to furnish the apartment, and thankfully my wife was there to help me with our exit strategy to get in the apartment. And now looking back 6 months, it was worth the effort that we put into it to not the relationship that we had up until the separation had played. Now looking back, we're in a wonderful place. Despite the separation, we're both going through counseling, we're both spending time together, our kids are happy, and all around really can't argue. But to sum it up, important takeaways is getting involved with, if you're in New Hampshire, Future Insight, futureinsight.org, or your local association for the blind or council for the blind through the state in your respective jurisdiction. Getting orientation and mobility if you're a newcomer to blind. If you're a lifelong person who's been blind or visually impaired your whole life, you've had that orientation and mobility to some degree ACEs. But if you're new and you're married and you have it really does take a toll on. And having a peer support group, whether you're or born or a child onset visual impairment, getting hooked up to a peer support group was life-saving as well, to learn yourself, to go in and share your frustrations, residential environment, to have people offer suggestions, to show you how to do things without reinventing the wheel, to make your blind life less frustrating. And I found that I was able to put on my big boy pants and recreate a household that was stable for my daughter and I, and stable enough to have my wife come down and go back to Tilton, and to be able to discuss those things with friends outside of the peer support. But I have many friends who are dear friends outside to communicate with when we're not in that once a month 3 hours of confine. And that's been very, very therapeutic. So I would recommend getting in touch with local site center, orientation and mobility, learning how to use a cane, getting involved in a peer support group, and getting involved with the local blind, because we're out there to live our lives like else in the sighted community. But to that end, my friends, I am going to conclude this installment of my recovery, and you have a great day.